I wasn't around for Hurricane Hazel, but I still hear people talk about it. I remember Hurricane Hugo. I strongly remember Hurricane Fran, Bertha. There's several other ones more recently. They've flooding. Matthew was another recent one. There's some when you go through. There's like restaurants down at the coast that'll have like on the side of their wall the level written where the water rose. Right, like it's a part of our state, and they're one of those things that, where the nature is both beautiful and cool, and we study these weather patterns and you watch them and you track them, but also violent and dangerous and sometimes a little bit tragic when loss of life is involved. I don't think we've had any loss of life on the coast, which makes it a little bit easier to talk about what's going on there right now. Hurricane season hasn't started, but we are bringing in Sam Walker from the Outer Banks. Follow him on Twitter at SamWalkerOBX in his Hurricanes jersey. And he was on the Weather Channel yesterday, and he's joining with us right now to talk about what's going on in the Outer Banks. Let's start there from the weather side. What is happening weather-wise that is causing houses to fall in the ocean, in the Atlantic Ocean?
Just Thursday on the Outer Banks. I mean, it's the nature of the beast out here in this 120-mile long sandbar that we live on. What we've had is a low-pressure system that kind of formed off the coast after storms that came through last week. And as it sat, it got more powerful and some other things combined with it. It's kind of a unique situation. I know the folks down the hall at the Weather Center can explain a lot better I can meteorologically, but we had a big blow and it's lasted for 4 days. And this is what happens when we get a big blow. We talk about hurricanes and tropical systems, names, the systems that get the names get all the glory.
Sure.
But it's the ones that don't have names that we deal with every fall and winter and right on into mid-spring and late spring that don't have names. Those are ones that usually do the worst damage and the worst problems for us here. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of days. We've had, multiple periods of high tides with waves on top of 10 to 12 feet breaking on the beach. That's chewed up all the sand that's there. And you've got a string of houses on Hatteras Island that have been threatened for a while, that two of them finally went in over the last, this week. One went in back in February. You've got Highway 12, which is the only connection for Hatteras and Ocracoke Islands, getting covered in sand and water again in multiple spots. The ferries can't run to Ocracoke because the wind's blowing too hard, and they got channel issues because of shoaling, sand filling up all the channels that run across Hatteras. It's just, but again, this is what life is like out here for a good portion of the population.
Obviously, there were not folks in the houses when they collapsed, but how long have those houses been sort of in danger? How long have we known that they're eventually going to be part of the ocean as opposed to part of the island?
Only about maybe not even 10 years. Hurricane Sandy really exacerbated the problem back in 2012. No, it wasn't Superstorm. It was Hurricane Sandy when it came through here in 2012. That stretch right there is just south of the Rodanthe Pier. That's if you've ever been to Hatteras Island, a pretty easy place to find. There's an old water park and go-kart track out in front of it that's been long abandoned. That area has had that problem for about 10 years. Those houses used to have a 12-foot high dune and 300 feet of sand in front of them, even as far as 20 years ago. That's just the nature of these sandbars. They are constantly moving. You go back to the 1930s when they were stabilized by the National Park Service, the WPA, to give people work was to build dunes. They did it from Virginia Beach all the way down to Cape Fear. That's, was to stabilize these things. And that was when the idea that came about of, hey, let's build on these sand dunes. Because when the locals here, you didn't live on the beach. You lived back on the sound side where I live.
Right.
Because that was the safe place if you wanted to live out here.
I should make you do your interviews in the true Soundside accent. Make you do a hoy-toy. Now, unfortunately, I feel bad because I bring you on, Sam Walker, because you are my expert of all things Outer Banks. But kind of like you alluded to, like we presume that makes you an expert in every field in the Outer Banks. So we ask you to be weather person, lawyer, government expert, all these other things. So feel free to tell me, hey, I don't know everything about this, but why are these houses not being torn down if the beach comes in and we know that they're inhabited, you can't live in them anymore, right? Why are we still leaving them up to then presumably leave kind of a mess when they do collapse?
Well, there's actually a thing that happened with the National Flood Insurance Program about 15 years ago. There was actually an option. You would get the National Flood Insurance Program would pay for you to move your house for 75%, or if you just tore it down, they'd give you 110% of the value. Well, the insurance companies didn't like that at all, and they quickly shut that down. And that program has been discussed in the congressional level of possibly coming back. There's not really a mechanism to force, we have this thing called property rights here in this country. The government can't come in and say, you got to tear that house down without giving you fair compensation. And we've seen that. We see a lot of that with houses being raised in flood-prone areas on the coast. And even as far, you go on into the interior sections of eastern North Carolina along the river, such as on the Tar River and places that have consistently flooded. There are ways to help folks who live in these areas, and most of them are economically depressed. I'm not going to lie.
Right.
There's a reason why I call I-95 the Berlin Wall. We are a little bit out here and get ignored sometimes. Sure. It feels like a lot. But you can't go and tell somebody. But what happens, though, with the process that you have out here with this particular situation, those houses were not occupied at the time. Most of them are rental houses. They are investment properties that people elsewhere own, rent them either through what's called VRBO, or they rent them through one of the many realty companies here. Or in some cases, they were second homes. The second one that fell actually was someone's second home for many years. They sold it just back in 2020. A Tennessee realtor bought it, and they got about a year and a half out of it. And then 5 months ago, the septic tank was compromised. Once that septic tank is compromised, we don't have sewer systems out here. We just don't.
Yeah.
You live on a septic tank, and it's a big concrete box buried in the sand with a pipe running to it. And you got to get a truck to come pump it out when it fills up. Eventually, it gets compromised, and Dare County or one of the towns, if it's in a town, says can't occupy it. It's no longer, it's condemned.
Yeah.
That's what's happened with these houses. And then the Park Service, because Park Service owns the beach. That's the other angle of this, is these houses are in Dare County, but the beach that was in front of them is actually Cape Hatteras National Seashore. We all own it. It's public land. But eventually that has eroded underneath, and the Park Service is trying to work with these property owners either to move the houses or demolish them. For the most part, it's better just to leave them up, let the insurance companies handle it, which of course creates a mess because we've got nails and boards strewn 20 miles of beach all the way down to the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse from these houses collapsing. It's a complicated situation that there's really no easy solution. That it comes down to is just money.
Yeah, it's and it's going to be a situation. Well, obviously, as you alluded to, the Outer Banks, it's an ongoing situation. It's ever happening, but more and more, this is going to be happening not just at the Outer Banks, but obviously anywhere in North Carolina, and again, not just at oceans too. The climate change and the flooding will have effects on anywhere near rivers or communities just based on water.
I love that shirt that Sebastian Vettel wore in Miami this weekend, the F1 at the Grand Prix. That in 50 years they're going to have it as the first underwater Grand Prix in Miami.
Yeah.
I mean, you live out here, we see it every day. You can tell it's a different story than when I was a kid, where the beach is, where the beach isn't. It's constantly moving. But we definitely deal with more and more storms like this because of these obvious changes in the climate.
What's the status of is Highway 12 passable right now?
Just reopened at the top of the hour, in fact, at 12 o'clock. It reopened the traffic. The ferries are running again to Ocracoke. That's good because there's people who have been either trying to get there or stuck there for an extra 3 or 4 days, which can be fun and then kind of gets a little like, we got to go. But yeah, they did reopen it. Still a lot of sand and water on the roadway there. Something to note, and we get this all the time. People have been asking me, can I get to Nags Head in all this rain? Well, it's not rain. And yes, you can get to Nags Head. The geography here is what we're talking about with Highway 12 being closed is just this connection to places you're familiar with, where the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse is. Buxton, Avon, Frisco, Rodanthe, Salvo, Waves, Ocracoke, Hatteras Village. Those are the places that are impacted directly by this.
Right.
There's another stretch of beach that's been impacted. That's Corolla and North. I know a lot of folks from the Triangle, especially in inland sections of North Carolina, do come to Corolla more than they come maybe anywhere else other than Ocracoke.
Right.
We have the problem up there is it's a 4-wheel drive area. You have to drive on the beach to get there, and every high tide has made it impassable. That's a lot easier today to get up and down. So things have improved. Sun will be back out here probably by next week, hopefully. But one thing I can say is if you're headed to the beach this weekend, anywhere in North Carolina, do not go in the ocean. Just don't. The rip current threat is still going to be high. Mother Ocean will try everything she can to kill you. There's a lot of good websites to figure out. Check with the National Weather Service, the Weather Channel. Dare County has this cool thing called OBX alerts you can sign up for that you get text messages what the beach conditions are. If you don't know how to swim in the ocean, it's not Falls Lake, folks. It's not Lake Gaston. That thing will kill you if every chance it can get. So be careful. Stay out of the ocean this week. Give it a few more days and it'll calm down. Should have a pretty good late May, it looks like.
Look at that. Some safety tips. And no, we're being totally serious. We appreciate that, Sam Walker, because, again, the beach is, for me at least, growing up in Raleigh, the beach is a huge part of being a North Carolinian. And both appreciating it, respecting it, and realizing what it could do are a huge thing. You got a prediction for the Hurricanes game tonight?
Yeah, I'm going to say that those Boston butts are going to get smoked tonight and chopped up good. A little vinegar, a little red pepper. Throw them on a bun. We'll all be happy tonight about 10 o'clock.
That's somebody who knows how to smoke a Boston butt and make a sports prediction. Sam Walker, we appreciate the insight from the Outer Banks and the safety tips. Go Canes tonight, and best of luck with the cleanup and the ever-changing environment down there at OBX.
Thanks, Hayes.